as soon as possible. Okay, so welcome back, and I hope you have done the task that I've given. Anybody with the output for the program? Yeah, the phone number and the email address extractor. Anybody with the output? At least have you guys tried to execute it? Okay. What about others? Anybody who faced a problem? Please ask your other friends to join as soon as possible. I have to take your attendance also. Okay, so those who have tried, very good. I appreciate it. Uh, those who have not, please make a note of it and try. I'll give you some more time. Maybe in the next class, you should come up with the output for this. Okay, and in the next class, we shall discuss about that particular program. What problems do we face in that, and how it can be resolved. Fine. So I'll give you one more day time to explore that program. It's a kind of a small project, a mini project, right? So execute that program. You can make use of the same program, or you want to modify, you can tune the program according to you, right? But try to execute that program. It's a very important program. It deals with whatever we have learned in the module so far, uh, and execute and implements those things, right? So it's very important. In the next class, we shall discuss about that program. I'll give you one more day time to execute it. Those who have tried, very good. Please record the output or take a screenshot or save that file wherever you want to save it, and we shall discuss in the next class. Right. So let me share the screen. Okay. Please ask your other friends to join as soon as possible. The strength is very less. Those who will not be joining will be losing on the attendance. Okay. So So next part in the model, in this same model, we are going to start off with our next chapter of this third module, that is reading and writing files, which is the eighth chapter, right? In the eighth chapter, reading and writing files. So this is again very interesting chapter. It deals with the different types of operation that we do. Most of you are already familiar with, right? How do we read a file? How do we write a file? What are the different methods that you can do? But this is not the usual method that we do. This is with respect to the commands, or how can we retrieve those directories and those things using those commands and instructions, right? We will be looking forward for that, right? It will not be as simple as clicking the mouse buttons to open a file or create a file or read uh, from that file, but instead we will be making use of the commands and instructions to do these operations, right? So but the it's very basic, very easy to do. So we'll start off with just what are files and file paths, right? So files, the file has basically two properties, which is first being the file name, right, and the file path. These are very two important properties of files, right? We need to have a file name, and we need to have a write path for that particular file. For example, in your whatever in your system, there might be some folder called C user and some random folders, documents, and so on. So depends, and it'll be different in your case, it will be different in my case, and so on, right? So, but every system, every device, every operating system here has particular file has many files, and every file has a particular path, right, and a particular name, right? So these files we store it into a folders, or we call it directories also, right? These are the directories or folders, or a typical file hierarchy, how it would look like. So let's say we have this C folder, and inside we have user folder, then we have some folder, this is basically the author name, else wizard, and then we have other folders like documents, we have a document folder, project.docs. So this is the main file, and these are the different folders, or in other words called directories, right? Folder is a more modern word compared to directories. Directories is what we usually prefer when we talk about here in the files and folders concepts, right? And we store these files or these folders or these directories in some drive, some storage location. It can be a local drive, or it can be a uh, external drive, or it can be a cloud storage, anything, right? So but everything has two properties which are common, that every file will have a file name, right, number one, and number two, every file will have a location, right? It will have a path where it will be actually stored, right? So these are two very important aspects of file. Now, the representation of this file can be different, right? For example, this the path in the Windows, right? The path for the files in the Windows, they usually are written using backslashes, right? For example, if you want to have any folder, for example, let's say I have this my file, and here you can see that the folders here, the location wherever you see, mostly on Windows the paths are written using backslash. If you can explore, if you open your file explorer, and when you see that this the location of a particular file on Windows, it will be backslashes. You will have backslashes followed by the directory name, then again inside that directory file name or whatever. But in the operating system 10, Mac OS 10 and the Linux, they use forward slash to represent the path for a particular file. So this is the simpler difference, simple difference of how we do. Now, in order to retrieve these different operations that we are going to do here with respect to files, we have to make use of some commands, some instructions, right? And when we make use of these commands or these instructions which are related to the operating system, then we have to import the important module here, that is the operating system module, right? So we have to start off with importing that operating system module, and then whatever these commands, these instructions, functions or methods, whatever we want to operate, we have to we can operate with this after, only after importing the operating system. So here in the later stage, whatever the programs or instructions, whatever we see, whenever you practice, make sure that you are importing those modules, which is operating system OS. Import OS before you start off with any of these operations, right? So whenever we work with these files or folders and directories, one concept, that is the current working directory, is again which is also represented as the keyword CWD, right? So which will tell you about which directory are you presently working in, right? So the current working directory, if you have to have a simple demonstration of it, you can say os.get CWD, which will return you the current working directory, right? So let me just show you the example. For example, let's say here I have to first import OS, right? And I will say the simple instruction, that is os dot get me the current working directory, right? It is for short CWD. And when I hit enter, it will show me the location, right? It will give me the path of my current working directory. Now, since I am working with the Python ideally here, so it is showing me the location of my current working directory, that is user, Amrit, and so on. So then Python 3832, this is my main folder, right? So this is my current working directory. Now, if you want to change the current working directory and you want to switch it to some other directory, right? What we usually do is we open the my computer, we go to the particular drive, we open that folder using mouse, and then we go to that particular folder. But when you are working on commands, you can directly give one single instruction to switch to a particular directory, right? So let's say here I want to change the directory to Windows system, right? So simple instruction that os.chdr. Now chdr is stands for change directory to what? To this, right? So when you hit enter, when you execute this, for example, let me show you this. Let me execute this instruction. Let's say os dot change directory, right? And change directory to this. Now, if there is no system32 in my Windows folder, it will give me an error, or if it is there, it will execute it. Now, since I have not got any error after execution, as you can see here, that means that I do have a folder called C followed by Windows, and then there's again a folder called System32 in my case also. So if I have to view that, I can simply again put os dot get current working directory and execute it. Now you can see that my current working directory has been changed, and currently I am not in the Python folder. I'm in the Windows System32 folder, right? So just by this simple instruction, by this simple one command, I can switch the directory wherever I want. For example, if I have to go to a different drive, like D drive, then I can simply go to that drive giving this command os dot change directory D colon followed by whatever the folder I want to visit. So this is a simple example of current working directory. And like I said, if there is no folder exists, then you might probably get an error that the system cannot find the file specified, right? Okay, so here is another very important aspect of when we talk about files and folders, reading or writing a particular file. Very important aspect, which you must have already learned in maybe operating system subject, that is absolute and relative paths, right? Now, what is absolute and relative path? As the name suggests, absolute. Absolute means it will give you everything about it, right? It will give you the beginning of the path, right? It will give you everything about the path, that is the right from the root folder, right? So absolute path, which always begins with the root folder. So usually, if you see a location or a file which starts off with a root folder, that means it is an absolute file. And if you have something in between, like your current working directory, then that particular path is the relative path, right? So in other words, relative path is which is relative to the program's current working directory, right? So that is the minute difference between the relative path as well as absolute path. So absolute path will have the root folder. It will start from the root folder, so it will be the full location, the complete location, whereas the relative path will be the path with respect to the program's current working directory. Right. Now, there are also the other way to represent. There are other representations. There are other representations. For example, there are also a dot and a dot folder, right? So now what is this dot and dot folder? You must have already seen. Let me show you an example like this, right? You must have seen some location followed by this dot and dot, and then followed by some location, right? Some file name. So what do that mean? These dots, right, dot and dot, they are two different way to represent it. A single dot for a folder name is shorthand for a particular directory. That's this directory, right? That means the directory that you are working with. So single dot means the file, single dot followed by the file name means that the file name inside that current working directory, right? That is within that your working directory. And when you have dot, that is two dots followed by any particular file name, for example, this, that means that it is the file from the parent directory, right? It is the folder or a file from the parent folder. So, for example, let's say we have these, this is the layout. Let's say we have this C drive, inside we have a folder bacon, then we have fizz, spam.txt, a file, then we have spam.txt again inside of bacon, right? Here in the inside bacon, we have fizz as well as spam.txt, but inside fizz, we have again spam.txt, but along with bacon, we have one more folder called eggs in the C drive, and then again in that we have spam.txt and spam.txt again inside the egg folder. So this is basically the layout you can imagine. I think this is the different folders, different directories with different files, documents inside those files. Right now, as you can see, for every folder or every directory here, we have the relative path as well as the absolute path for it, right? The relative path, as I said, if we have dots, it represents the parent directory. And in the absolute path, there will be no dots. It will be directory starting from the root, name of the root folder. And as you can see, it is C:/, right? So that will be our absolute path. Now, Now, when I move inside that C folder and we see the relative path, absolute path for the different files here, right? So I hope you know the difference now, the relative path as well as the absolute path. The simple instruction to create a new directory is to make use of the command again import os dot make directory, right? Make dirs, right? I repeat, the instruction to create a new folders using the method called os.make_dirs, right? So this will help us to create a new file or a new directory, right? So what is that new directory? You have to mention inside that as a first argument. So when we give the instruction like C // delicious / walnut / waffles, then it is simply going to create those files. Let me show you, or maybe you can imagine that when you give this instruction, it is simply going to create a file like this, right? So C folder, delicious folder again, inside that walnut folder, and inside that again apples. So these folders were not existing before. These were newly created directories using this command. Right. Another very important aspect here, that is os.path. os.path is a module inside the OS module itself, right? It is the OS module which we have already seen in the previous slide. It is the main module, the operating system module, and the OS path is a part of this OS module, right? Now, what is the job of this OS path, right? os.path. os.path module, basically it contains many helpful functions which is related to the file names and the file paths. So the reason why we have this is for any operation that we do with respect to the paths of different directories, then we can make use of this os.path. Now, as I said that in the previous examples, in the hereby examples, whatever examples that we are going to see, most of these examples follow in this section will require the operating system module, and we have to import those modules, that is import OS, at the beginning of any of the program that we write here in the start of the ideally. Otherwise, all the programs that we see further in this section for the lectures, they will not execute because the important module is uh, OS module. So you have to import OS module. Don't forget that to do that. Now let us go ahead and discuss how do we handle this absolute and relative paths. So just to check whether a path, a particular path, is an absolute path or no, we can have these different types of methods here to check whether these things are there or no. For example, os.path.apps path path. So what this will do is it will simply check whether the path, this instruction will return a string of the absolute path of the argument. Now argument is the location itself, that is the path itself. Now, one more benefit of this instruction is whatever the path that you give, it will easily convert that path. If that is a relative path, then that will be converted into an absolute path, right? So basically, its job is to return the string of the absolute path. It will give you that particular absolute path. The second handling method here is the os.path.isApps, followed by the path name. Now, what does isApps does is, as the name suggests, is apps, that is it a absolute path or no? So, if the path that we have given as the input is the absolute path, it will return true, or else it will return false, right? And then there's one more method called os.path.relative path, which takes two arguments, that is the path as well as the second argument as start. Now, what it will does is it will return a string of the relative path from the start path to the path that you have specified, right? So, if the start is not specified, if there is no start, then by default it will consider that the current working directory is the start path, and accordingly it will give you the result. For example, here, if I say os.path.appspath dot, now dot is the path, so it is simply going to it is simply going to give the output of our current directory, that is our absolute path, that is C Python 34. And if there is a specific folder that you want to access, then you can simply give followed by that dot, right? So it will give you the location or the path of that particular folder. In case if you want to check whether this particular location or this particular path is an absolute path or no, we can simply make use of os.path.isApps. So it will check whether it is an absolute path or no. So as you can see, just dot, it is not an absolute path, so it is returned false. But if we give a path which is absolute path, let's say if I give this as a path, then it will give me true because it is an absolute path, right? So one more way to do it is simply pass the parameter to isApps as the os.path.appspath. So appspath will convert the path into the absolute path, and every time whenever isApps checks this, it will always return true, right? Like I mentioned here in the previous listing, os.path.appspath, this is an easy way to convert a relative path into an absolute path. So whatever this will return, it will be an absolute path, right? This will be an absolute path, and when we check whether it is an absolute path, it will return true. Right. So this is an example of how a directory name and a base name will be denoted. So the last slash, whatever that last slash will be, everything before that last slash is the directory name, and followed by whatever is there in front of that backslash, that will be the base name, right? So please remember this. Now, finding the file sizes and current folders. These are again very easy aspect which you are already aware with. I'm just refreshing you with these things, and how to make use of these commands is what main focus here. So finding the file sizes. Now usually when we find the size of the file, we go to the file, we right click, we go to the properties and check out the file size, right? But how can we do it in the command? How can we do it using these instructions, right? These commands. So simply making use of the os.path.getSize. That's it. Just one instruction, os.path.getSize, and then whatever the path, whatever the folder that you want to find size, you can mention that file in the argument path, right? That will be used for finding the size. Now, if you want to list the directory path, it will you can make use of os.list directory path. Right? For example, os.path.get size, and I just simply give the location of this file. Right? Let's say I have this file. If there is no file existing, it will give you an error. But let's say I have a file here. Please don't assume that these things will be exactly same in your case. In your case, it might not be. These files might not be present, and you might have an error instead of the output. So let's say I do have the folder, so and so folder with so and so file, and when I execute os.path.get size, it will give me the size of that particular file, right? So since it is a exe file, we have the size a little bigger size. And when I check for os.list directory, it will give me the list, the complete list, right, of all the files inside the directory. So I have so many list items here, separated by comma, but as you can see, it's a list, it's a complete list. Now, uh, another very important aspect is checking the validity of the path, whether that particular path is valid or no, right? Whether that path exists, whatever the path that we specify, whether it is exist, whether that particular path is a file, or whether that particular path is a directory, right? So we have to check the validity of this thing. So if it exists, if that particular path exists, it will simply return true or else false. And if that particular path is a file, it will return true that it is a file, or else it will return a false. And if that particular directory is a directory, then os.path.is directory will return you true if it is a directory, or else it will otherwise returns false. Right? Simple as that. So, for example, let's say I have this path c.windows, c/windows, right? Whether this exists, whether I have a C drive and I have a folder called Windows, it will check, and if it is there, it will return true. Similarly, let's say I have a folder, I have a drive C, which is my root folder, and I have some folder which does not exist, or this is just a made up folder, right? I'm just giving a random name, right? But I don't have that, so it will simply return me false. Likewise, whether it's a directory, system32 is actually a directory, it's not a file, it's a directory. So it will return as a directory true. And when I ask whether it is a file, system32 is not a file, it is a folder, right? It's a directory. So for is file, it will return me false. Similarly, for is directory, it will return me false because this is actually a file, .exe file. And when I check for .exe file, whether it is a file, I get true. So this is a simple validation, how we can perform simple validation for the different files, different directories and so on, right? So I think that's all enough for today's lecture. If you have any doubts, you can feel free to ask the doubts. Anybody with any doubt? Yeah, please tell me if there is any doubt. Sanket says no. What about others? If you have doubt, please feel free to ask. Now Google has added one more feature. You can see here that to raise a hand, right? So let me show you. Yeah, to raise a hand here. So if you have any doubt, you can stop me anytime. You can raise a hand, and we can discuss that thing again, right? So I hope the things are very easy to understand. Actually, if you just go through it once, you will understand it. These are very basic. The only thing here is how do you implement these basic things using the commands. Right? That's all main area of focus is. So if there are no doubts, let me quickly have an attendance. Can you please put it in the chat box? That would be better. Please put it in chat box, preferably roll number 1 to 10 and 10 to 20.